Thank you, and good afternoon. I have to say, you're all looking very good today. Well, over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to talk about technologies at the gate, a very deep subject and one of my favorites. So if you look through the gate of this spaceship, you'll see a picture that was taken almost 40 years ago. To be exact, December 24th, 1968. And it was taken almost by mistake. Astronaut Bill Anders was on the Apollo 8 lunar orbiter, and his job was to take pictures of the moon, looking for safe landing sites for future expeditions. And then all of a sudden, he looked over his shoulder, and he saw the Earth rise. He couldn't help himself break from protocol, turn around and take a picture. That picture has become the most influential picture of all time. I love that picture because it was enabled by the technology of the lunar orbiter. This is before we landed on the moon, so you had to be traveling around the moon to take that picture. It was enabled by the camera technology of the day. But the actual moment that Bill took that picture was a synapse in his brain that was inspired by that beautiful blue planet rising into the sky. I was a 12-year-old boy when I was looking at those pictures in Life magazine, and I often wondered what actually caused him to break from protocol to take that picture. And then last year, my son, who's studying neuroscience at Brandeis University in Boston, was telling me about the biggest discovery in that field. And the discovery is mirror neurons, M-I-R-R-O-R. These are cells that are on the top of our brain, and they fire when we take action. But they also fire when we see other people taking a similar action. So if I yawn, maybe you get the feeling of yawning, but I don't want any of you yawning during my presentation. Some scientists have attributed these mirror neurons as the reason for the rapid evolution of mankind in culture and knowledge beyond Darwinian models. I think of these as little neural boomerangs that go out from our brains, and they mix with other people's boomerangs, and they come back and report. Right now, I can kind of feel these boomerangs coming from you. And imagine here at the GRLC, each one of our brains has about 100 billion of these neurons flying around, mixing, communicating, reporting back. This is really the power of partnerships and brain stimulation. The best equation I've ever seen to stimulate the brain, and believe me, in consulting, my brain was drained so many times with brainstorming sessions where you go round and round and round and get tired and there's nothing left in your brain. Brains need to be stimulated. So this formula on the slide in the lower left-hand corner basically was created by Doug Hall, the author of the book Innovation Engineering. And he says that meaningfully unique ideas, MUI, is equal to the stimulation to the brain raised to the power of diversity divided by fear. Fear factor in business and life suppresses innovation. In fact, fear, F-E-A-R, my definition of that, 90% of it is fantasized experiences appearing real. So really to stimulate the brain, you need that diversity, the stimulus, but manage the fear. And what I hope to do is stimulate your brain around the technologies at the gate. I always like talking about the brain, whether or not it's the physical brain, the feeling in our heart or in our gut. This human intelligence is really the most critical thing in how we apply the technologies at the gate. So here they are. There's 6 big technologies at the gate that are changing our world. The first 3, 5G, broadband, cloud, Internet of Things, you've all heard of before. Basically, 5G is going faster and faster. By 2024, it'll be 3 times the speed that it is today. Cloud, the practice of putting servers out on the network and having third-party providers do the back-of-the-house IT, whether or not it's Azure or Amazon, Sales Cloud. It makes businesses easy to run because you don't have to worry about the back-of-the-house IT support. And the Internet of Things was enabled by sensors that allow appliances to understand what they're doing and have sense and response mechanisms. So we've really arrived at the point of this artificial intelligence. And it's interesting because when I was in college, I studied artificial intelligence. I thought that would be a great thing to major in, and I'd make a lot of money and get a great job. But it really didn't go anywhere at the time because the predecessor technologies of 5G, cloud, Internet of Things, they weren't in place for artificial intelligence to really take off. But now it's really there. So artificial intelligence is basically the study of agents inside the appliances that sense and respond and can make better decisions locally so the equipment that can do its job. I'm going to move on to blockchain, and the first thing I'm going to say is don't get confused with Bitcoin. Blockchain is not Bitcoin. I'm talking about blockchain on supply chain. This is a public distributed ledger that really cannot be tampered with, where information can be stored. So the entire food supply chain from farm to fork over the next 10 years, particularly in North America, will be blockchain. So there'll be complete transparency on what happened to the food over a course of its life. So if you're told, well, this is a grass-fed burger, or it's organic, or it doesn't have antibiotics, with blockchain, you'll know. Blockchain will completely transform the efficiency of supply chain because it'll provide real-time information on where goods are in their journey to consumer. And finally, if there is a foodborne illness of some sort, within minutes, it can be traced back to the root cause to minimize the propagation of that problem in society. Finally, augmented reality is the next big thing. Whether or not you talk to Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, they all agree that this is it. It's the next big thing like the smartphone. Basically, these are superimposed realities, images, information that help us understand what's happening to us at the current moment. We're already experiencing it in some ways today. Last month, I was in Tokyo enjoying a quarter pounder at a McDonald's. And I was sitting there and I noticed a QR code on the package. And I scanned it, and all of a sudden I was on a horseback touring the ranch in Australia where the beef was raised. So even though I was eating this quarter pounder, my experience was augmented through meeting the cattle ranchers who paid attention to the beef during the supply chain process. So as I go forward, I'm going to really talk about these technologies which are affecting the world, and in particular, how they affect our business inside food service. In the end, it's about how these technologies create the experience. And I chose this slide because it really shows the experiences at the intersection of food, equipment, and people. So whether or not this is a gourmet burger with its 10 or more ingredients that are all blockchain for the consumer to really trace back what happened, or there's an augmented reality tool to better enjoy the experience, these are the kinds of technology effects that are going to occur in the industry. Meanwhile, we've got people, young people, a whole generation that grew up with smartphones, and they expect these tools in our business. If we don't provide them the tools, the training, the know-how, we're not going to be able to attract them into the business. And finally, the technology. The technology, it's not only in terms of training the technology, but it's in adapting it to the business operation. As I transition from this idea of experience, what I'm really trying to do is leave you that it's not about the technology, it's about the experience. And the human brain has the responsibility to take these technologies and turn them into the experience. So I'd like to quote John Lasseter. John was one of the founders of Pixar. He's now head of digital for Disney Animation, Chief Creative Officer. And the quotation is that the art challenges the technology, but the technology inspires the art. For us, the art is the experience that we want to create for our consumers, which really drive growth in the industry. So coming back now to the ground floor, my job, we meet with customers every week, and they pretty much all say the same thing. How do I grow my business? How can I expand my sales? My menu's getting complicated. How do I keep it fresh? Labor, how do I find people? How do I train people? And by the way, you're trying to sell me more equipment. I don't have any place to put it. My kitchens are getting smaller. And so I started really thinking about this years ago because we're in the business of selling equipment. And yet, customers are saying we're not really meeting their need by selling traditional equipment. So we started to bring in artists into these meetings to draw pictures of what the customers were saying, because I also learned that customers don't like reading long reports around these innovation studies. And this was the illustration that one of the artists created. And he said, just too much equipment. Don't sell me any more equipment. And here I am, 30 years of my life, designing ice machines, beverage, ovens, fryers, grills, hot holding. Sell one more piece. My performance appraisals were around selling, creating that new innovation. Realizing customers don't have room for it. So this required a complete rethink of the kitchen as an operating system. We completely reorganized our company to break down the silos among these brands and integrate them into holistic systems that can go into our customers' establishments and create a step change around productivity. The key to this was really breaking down the silos, and I think that's the key to the industry, to break down the silos across these different functions. So this is where our work comes into play, and most of our programs are really geared around improving cost management. This is largely related to minimizing the complexity in our organization, improving operational efficiency. Connectivity comes into play, as well as automation. I'll be talking about these a little bit later. The projects that are the most exciting, though, are the projects that result in profitable growth. Everybody wants to grow their business, increase their share price, increase the business value. So this really comes down to these multiple cooking functions, multi-purpose equipment. They don't have room for 3 pieces. How do you combine the function of 3 pieces into 1 piece and offer a full service solution? And so in all of these assignments, each one of the kitchens is mocked up, is modeled, and it's grounded in a full culinary experience where the food experience is communicated to the consumer before selecting any type of solution around the integrated kitchen. Connectivity, the connected restaurant. Obviously, the first thing is if the equipment doesn't have connectivity capability, it can't be part of this club. So if you're buying equipment today and it doesn't have connectivity, it's going to be a dinosaur tomorrow. And my new boss at Welbilt, he said, well, Rick, help me out with this connectivity because our industry moves at glacial speeds. Glacial speeds. I would say that it's moving faster every year. And it's beginning to move at what I would call an exponential rate. Instead of 1, 2, 3, at 30, you're at 30. If you count that way in exponential, 1, 2, 4, 16, 256, at 30, you're at 1 billion. So we're trying to really keep up with this change and ensure that the equipment is connected to each other, is connected across the interface of the front of the house and the back of the house. And now we heard from Technomic yesterday all this great business around drive-through, takeout. There's managing the driver pool, managing the delivery, managing the dispatch. So the connected kitchen is really the pipes that allow a kitchen operating system to emerge, which I call the kitchen brain. So coming back to this notion of a brain in our head, there's a brain behind the operation of a kitchen. And today, that brain is usually the store manager. I do a lot of work benchmarking good store operation, bad store operation, and the number one thing I find, what separates a good store from a bad store, is the store manager. Store manager has an enormous amount of tacit knowledge. experiential knowledge, looking at the consumers in the queue, looking at the drive-thru, looking at the French fries in the holding bin, looking at the holding station. And they make decisions on what to do, what to cook, how much, when. Over time in a connected kitchen, these decisions can be made explicit and shared across an enterprise. So the variability in performance from restaurant to restaurant can be greatly improved. Again, this can only happen if the appliances are connected. So there's a stepwise process to get there. These things are happening now. This is a kitchen we built in Tampa, Florida for a convenience store customer. On the left-hand side, you've got a multi-purpose beverage station. This is similar to the Freestyle around making carbonated soft drink, but it makes smoothies, and it's an integrated system. There's an ice machine, there's a blender station, an under-counter refrigerator, all built into that, and the consumer can create their own drink. On the right-hand side, you've got accelerated cooking ovens. These ovens can basically cook any food to gourmet quality at 10 times the speed of conventional cooking. They can bake, broil, roast, toast, poach fish, all just by changing the digital information to the oven. Now, because we're evolving to that point, and not every place has connectivity, these require USB sticks to put the data in there. But if you have 2,000 restaurants, mailing USB sticks around the world becomes kind of complicated. So again, connectivity becomes the enabler of this type of restaurant. The smart cloud also enables asset management. So each one of these appliances measures the on-time, the cycles, the total duration of all the critical components, and can inform the operator when the components need to be changed before they fail, or they can work with the service providers to do that as well. Now, you might be thinking, wow, this is a lot of stuff. How do I get started? My equipment's not connected. I'll say today there's so many digital tools that you can use on a manual operation to study it. It's worth looking at. And my favorites is camera technology. And when I do kitchen studies, I've been doing them for a long time, generally you count footsteps, 10,000 footsteps to one shift, you look at work triangles. With a 360 camera, you can do away with the clipboards, you do away with the video, and this will actually, with its software, map out the operation, show you where the collision points are, where the bottlenecks are, and recommend a better kitchen layout to use, because it starts with that core kitchen layout. So there's many process steps that can be improved through the application of digital technology, whether or not it's time and motion, food safety, inventory management. Moving on to automation. Automation basically is a system for reducing labor, whether or not physical or cognitive labor in a restaurant. This is a picture of Spice Restaurant in Boston. It was created by 4 MIT students, backed by Daniel Boulou. Daniel is famous for his restaurant in Midtown, Daniel, a 2-star Michelin restaurant. And basically this has a portion dispensing system for all of the food, and it cooks in those induction tumblers. Lots of food theater, allows the consumer to actually add the spices that they want. And you know what? Some people love it, and some people hate it. The reviews are, this is incredible. I can adjust my spices without insulting the chef. The chef can now focus on the consumer. But people that don't like it, where's the robot? I went into this robotic kitchen, I'm looking for a robot. I actually don't think we're going to see a lot of robots in kitchens. I think it's going to be more invisible. Think the Tesla. The Tesla has the automation built in. Some people say, oh, cooking's an art. This is a shame. How can we automate it? Others say, oh, these greedy inventors, they're going to put people out of business. So, this automation is like a two-edged sword. How you apply it relates back to your business objective, the experience you're trying to create. I'm going to move on to talk about a hot side technology, a cold side technology, what's going on in beverage, and then close out with some business model examples. So the business model transformations will be the biggest. So if you adopt a technology, yeah, that can make a difference. But if you combine the technologies with a new business model, that's really transformational. So, we all know about microwaves. Microwaves were actually discovered by accident. Raytheon had the radar system, and one of the guys that was working in the factory put his lunchbox by the radar antenna, and he went to have lunch, and he found out it was heated. And the Japanese figured out how to make magnetrons very low cost. Microwaves took off, but they never really became cooking devices until microwave was combined with high-velocity air. And that is the basis of all accelerated cooking today. But it's still the same microwave. These microwaves are only about 1 millimeter in length. They vibrate water molecules. As a result of the vibration, they create heat, but they don't differentiate from any type of food. The next method of electromagnetic heating is radio frequency. Radio frequency are long waves. They're actually about 100 meters in length versus 1 millimeter. And the nice thing, when they're that long, you can keep them inside a box. You could put them inside a conveyor oven. They don't need these trap systems to hold the microwaves in place. And they can actually selectively cook food of different types all at the same time. Because with the radio frequency sensor, it can adjust the amplitude and the frequency of the radio in order to heat the food. So all the foods shown here, the chicken, the potatoes, the South African peppers, all cooked at the same time in one oven. I believe this is just at the gate. It'll be impacting our business in the next few years. On the coal side, I thought it was pretty interesting this summer that Starbucks was offering 3D ice cream, offered by Dream Pops in Los Angeles at a few restaurants. This is all vegan. It contains no milk. It's all plant-based ice cream with a wide variety of exotic flavors: berry dream, mango roseberry, and coconut latte. 3D is coming into pizza. I've seen pizzas all 3D printed. I've seen plant-based burgers printed from a 3D system. In fact, our business, we make stainless steel equipment. So I actually saw some stainless steel parts 3D printed on a stainless steel 3D printer in Silicon Valley a couple of months ago. Think about what that'll do. We won't have to be inventorying spare parts all around the world. We can print them locally. So this is a technology that's at the gate that's coming on pretty quickly. Coffee. We heard from Technomic that the coffee segment is expanding very quickly. An example of 3D coffee, 2D is flat, 3D, the foam on the milk, the cinnamon. You can see the cinnamon helps take the shine off the top of my head a little bit. Moving on to cold coffee. Cold brew coffee is just expanding. And the next thing after cold brew is nitro. So these are nitrogen bubbles that are diffused inside the coffee, and they create a head almost like a Guinness. So it completely changes the mouthfeel, moves the caffeine all through your sensory profile. And the millennials love it because it helps chemically activate the caffeine inside the brain for studying late at night for those long exams. And who would have thought that nitrogen infusion would create a whole new category? Because yesterday we heard when Coca-Cola was invented back in the late 1886, I think it was around carbon dioxide. There isn't much carbon dioxide in the air. It's about 0.5%. And so carbon dioxide breaks out a solution pretty quickly. Nitrogen, we have 78% nitrogen in the air. So that's pushing back on the nitrogen inside these drinks. And the nitrogen drinks stay nitrogenated for a very long period of time. So I think there's going to be a whole range of beverages enabled through this technology. And we heard about some of those yesterday from Technomic in the breakout on beverage innovations. I'm going to move on and talk about some new business models. Zoom. Zoom has established a method for making pizza that transforms the whole industry. The first thing they do is through analytics, they can predict the type of pizza, the makeup, the menu mix, and they'll actually forward deploy these kitchens. These are basically kitchens on wheels. So our whole life, we're used to stationary kitchens, bricks and mortar. The problem with stationary kitchens, real estate's very expensive, labor's expensive. This model, the kitchens are moving based on where the demand is. Once they forwardly deploy that, the pizza is actually made en route, and so within 10, 15, 20 minutes, that product gets to the customer. Don't get confused with Zoom as only a pizza company. Pizza is their first reference customer. They're working with a number of food suppliers to employ this bake on the way, last mile strategy in their business going forward. They just closed $360 million of funding from SoftBank through the venture fund, and you'll be reading about that in the Wall Street Journal soon. And this is another type of model that's being enabled largely through predictive analysis, new technology, moving the asset bases of restaurants. Lastly, Cobb & Company. Cobb is a very small restaurant chain in New Zealand, and I was so impressed when I met their chief product officer. His name is Callum Inglis. Callum, would you stand up, please? Callum will be with us today in the breakout session at 4:30 in the Smart Kitchen in Inglis 1. And what Cobb did is they said, look, we can't wait for all these technologies and all these big companies. We're just going to hire a very young team and figure out the business systems that we can put together to make Cobb run better. And Callum, over the last year, has assembled a partnership of 10 companies to do that and has implemented that in his enterprise. It basically takes the stress out from ordering food, for counting food. It's all based on a photo system. So the food comes in the back door, you take a photo, it registers an inventory, you can walk through the shelves, take pictures, and it basically helps the operator inside their system run the restaurant better. The three things that I really liked was the one-stop ordering system, franchise-wide, the iPad stocking system for real-life stock layout, and the one photo stock receiving. So the message here is small companies can do it too. They don't have to wait for the big companies. Now, I don't know how Callum figured it all out so fast, and I think he's got a very understanding boss that lets him travel around the world and develop these partnerships. But it can be done, and sometimes it will go on faster in the smaller companies who don't have the bureaucracy and the inertia associated with change. And so what I'd like to do is close out reflecting on what we discussed. We first discussed the brain, and we reflected back on the Earthrise photograph, the most influential photograph of all time, which was almost taken by accident. And I'd like you now, before you jump in around these technologies, to take a pause inside your business and look back over each shoulder and think about how will these technologies really create experiences, because experiences is what it's all about. This is what will drive growth in our industry in the future. Thank you very much.